Those of you who enjoy gardening have learned long ago how important your soil is. If there's one idea that Jim Crockett left with us from his work in the Victory Garden, it was his continued reference to the importance of having good soil for the production of healthy, disease-free plants. The Yankee Woodlot and these balsam fir seedlings are no exception to this garden analogy. They, too, depend upon the quality of the soil to ensure a good, healthy, vigorous growth. The trees, however, being more long-lived than our garden plants, adapt with time to poor conditions, and although they appear to be doing well, that's not always the case. Tom Saviello is a forester with the International Paper Company and has made his career the study of forest soils and their influence on the trees that grow on them. We accompanied Tom to the Yankee Woodlot, where he explained this important relationship and demonstrated how woodlot owners can conduct a soils inventory of their woodlot.
Here's a site over here, Bud. I think we can see some of the things that we want to talk about in soils. Let me just clean it out a little bit.
All right. Go here.
Brush it off so we can see everything in here.
Okay, well, as far as the landowner is concerned, this just looks like a pile of dirt, Tom.
Soil, Bud. Soil.
What's the difference between dirt and soil?
Well, this is a commodity or a unit that plants want to live in, and I think that we as a landowner would have to look at it as a place for us to do our management on.
Tom, why should a landowner be interested in soils?
Well, I think too many times we as landowners and woodlot owners go out into the stand and look at the trees. We're always looking up. And I think why we need to look at the soils, we need to train ourselves to look up and down, and then look at the total resource and making a decision as how we need to manage that particular site and the way we should approach it. One of the things that we want to look at is if we're a farmer and we've got a prize corn crop, and we want to plant that prize corn crop, well, we have just so much land and just so much prize corn to put it in on. We want to put it in on our best part of our farm and not our worst part of our farm. And in forestry and managing a woodlot, I think that's the same idea. We have just so much time that we want to put into managing our woodlot. And so we want to look around and find the best place to put that time into. And that can be dependent on the stand somewhat, but it also needs to be dependent on the soil that we have located in the area.
The soil is kind of like a bank account. Some are earning a high rate of interest, and some of the other poorer soils may be earning either a low rate of interest or earning nothing at all.
Absolutely. In the future, technology may take some of those lower soils or lower sites and create the technology that we can get a great benefit or return on those. But right now, we don't have that, and we need to work with the good sites first, and then start working down towards our intermediate and our lower sites.
Okay, so this soil we're looking at, is this a good soil or is this a poor one, Tom?
Yes, this is a good soil. I think you can look at a couple things that give you keys to it being a good soil. In soils, the material is brought onto the area and it develops layers. This is a profile that we see here, and it exposes the different layers in the soil.
That material brought onto the area, how did it get here? It brought on from where?
Most of the area in the state of Maine and in New England were covered by glaciers up to 12,000 years ago. And if we can picture, let's try to give an example of this. Picture this rock as a sheet of ice covering the state of Maine, deep enough that it actually covered Mount Katahdin by quite a bit. And it was pushing down across the New England area, and as it pushed down, it bulldozed up material in front of it, and it also accumulated material on the tops of it. And this pushed down and, as I say, bulldozed it up. Now, about 13,000 to 12,000 years ago, that ice broke down and withdrew from the state. And what we ended up with is a dropping of this material on the area that we know as Maine or as New England. And then we formed, through weathering and through time, the different layers that we see here.
So we've got a big glacial dumping ground.
That's right. In most cases, 95% of the area up here would be this glacial dumping ground. And as I said, it develops into these different layers. The first layer is the organic mat, which we will talk about. Then we have underneath that the first layer. And I might add that soil, or point out at this point, soils people define those layers as A, B, and C. And the top layer being the A. And this is an A layer or A horizon right there.
Right below the organic mat.
Right, and that A horizon has had a lot of leaching. what has happened here is all the nutrients and all the organic matter that are located in that have moved out of it and accumulated in the next layer.
What does leaching mean?
Leaching just means washing out. If we just water moved down through the soil here, and acids and so forth from the organic horizon, and cleaned it out, just basically washed everything out of it, and caused it to accumulate down here in the next layer or horizon. And this next layer or horizon is called the B horizon. And that, in this particular soil, runs from here all the way down to somewhere in this area down here.
So the big B horizon.
This particular profile, this has got a very large B horizon. Then down below that, we get into the C horizon, which is the last layer or last horizon in there, and that's parent material. And at one time, the whole soil looked like this lower.
And this is what the glacier dumped.
That's right.
That's the dumping ground.
This is the dumping material, and it's changed in the upper part of it over time with weathering into the different layers that we see.
We've gained all this material. We've added this much over time.
Well, not really added this much. What we've done is weathered this much. We've changed this much. The whole profile, the whole soil looked like this layer right here.
So it didn't get deeper, but it's changed its color and its texture.
That's right. We changed it by leaching and accumulating the different materials in that profile.
So we've got these horizons. Now tell us about that top one.
Well, the top one is what we call the organic horizon, and that's simply, and we'll take a little piece of it out, we can see it pretty well here, I think. It's simply all of the organic materials that are from the trees and the different plants that are dumped on top of the soil.
What's organic material?
Okay, the organic material is this fine black material that we have on the top.
And that came from leaves?
Leaves, branches, animals, man in some cases. On the top part of this organic horizon, we can actually recognize what it's made up of. In this case, we can see some small pieces of wood, some needles, small branches. Then as we poke through that organic horizon, we start to get into a black unit of material that we can no longer recognize the needles, the branches, the twigs, and so forth.
Looks like that stuff you put in your garden.
Well, it's part of what it is. One of the terms that are often used is humus. Humus is part of that organic matter. It's not all of it, but part of it. And yes, it is some of the material that you do put in your garden.
And it acts kind of spongy. It's good to hold water.
Spongy, it holds a lot of water. And an important thing for forestry is it holds a lot of nutrients, and those nutrients are important for our tree growth. And in many cases, we should point out for the woodlot owner, he may not have all these different layers in his soils and should not be concerned about that. It's just simply, this is one that has everything so that we just have to be a good site that we can demonstrate a lot of things we want to see.
Maybe a little better picture just by your shoulder.
Yeah, just over here on the left. We've got a good picture of the A horizon in this area.
It's kind of gooey there.
Well, it sometimes will look that way, but it's usually very sandy if you start feeling it and looking at it.
And sand, just tell us about sand, the difference to...
Well, soils have texture, and I'm sure most of the woodlot owners are familiar with sand, silt, and clay, or sand that they might get to put in their driveway or on the snow, and clay being a heavy soil that a farmer might work with that holds a lot of water. Well, these soils particles come together to form what we call texture.
Okay, now tell us about sand particles and clay particles and all that stuff.
Okay, well, sand is the largest of the soil particles that we work with, and clay is the finest of the particles. But they usually don't exist as soil particles in themselves. They usually mix together to form what we call soil texture. The soil textures that are important for the landowner are those loamy textures. And I think most people talk about putting loam in their garden or loam on their lawn at somewhere in point in time. Well, it's the same in the woods. Those loamy textured soils are the better soils for our trees to grow in.
Now, is this loam in here?
Yes, this would be a sandy loam, which means we have about 65 to 70% clay, sand in there, and about 20% silt and about 10% clay, something in those relative proportions.
And this is in our B layer now?
This is in our B layer.
Okay.
That's right. Now, we move down through the B layer and we get down again to that C layer, which is parent material. Some of the important things that the woodlot owner can look for is the depth of rooting that he has in here. In this particular profile, we can actually see a root coming out as much as 25 inches down into the profile. If we quickly look at that, 30 inches into the profile.
So those tree roots are going all the way 2 feet down in the ground.
That's right, and that's another good sign of good soil. And I think not only is it got good soil from the sense that the roots can penetrate, those roots now give the stand a lot of stability so that they can withstand wind throw. We will look later and see some shallow soils that obviously the roots can't support that. They're also able to go down there to get nutrients, and they're also able to go down there and get a lot of water. So you've got a good depth of soil here. which is another important characteristic that the woodlot owner should look for in his land.
This is a good soil. Now, what looks different than a poor soil?
Well, this is a good soil, and we might call this a profile 1, or the best example of a profile. We have good depth throughout it. We have all the different layers or horizons through it. We have good rooting depth all the way down, and very good color throughout the profile. Now, another profile, a profile 2 or a secondary profile, might be a little shallower. The sea horizon or the sea layer being up in this area. It may be very compacted. The roots aren't able to penetrate down. They don't have the good support.
This is like a grading system, and profile 1 is real good.
Right.
Profile 2 is not quite so good.
Kind of intermediate, and profile 3, the last profile, we'd find no roots penetrating, say, greater than 8 inches into the soil. It might be because of too much water and so forth, but the upper part has most of the roots. You do not have the good color that you see here. I think today, as we look around, we'll see an example of a profile 2 and profile 3
So
soil.
profile 1 is deep, good color, plenty of root depth. Profile 2 is not quite so good, and it gets up shorter. Then profile 3, you say, is all right up here at the top
That's
of the
right.
ground.
All the roots are right up there on top of the ground, and they can't penetrate down into the profile.
Now, as we look around and we walk through the woods, how are we going to decide profile 1, 2, or 3?
Well, there are a couple ways that one can decide what soil type he has on his area. One way is a road cut, similar to what we're looking at today. This road cut would be one that is extended through the stand, a particular stand that the woodlot manager wants to work with, and he can clean it off similar to what we've done. A second way is to actually use the SCS.
What is the SCS?
SCS is the Soil and Water Conservation Service. And what they actually do is have mapped soils and created what we call soil surveys. Some of the counties in the state of Maine have already been mapped, with the soils being located and put into a booklet.
How does the landowner find out if his area has been mapped?
Well, in each county, there's an area, an SCS office, and all that person would have to do is contact that office. If a survey is available, they will give him one or copies of the areas that he's interested in. If it's not available, most of those soil scientists have a pretty good feel for what soils are located on their lands and how they're located on there.
What's that survey going to look like?
Well, it's actually a booklet, and in the booklet it's got some information in the beginning about the soils, some soil descriptions, and in the back part of it is reproductions of aerial photographs showing these soils. So with the landowner's stand map and knowing his locations, he can locate the soils that are on his particular area.
So he can take his timber stand map and also correlate that to a soil map.
Right, right. And then by asking a few questions from the SCS, he probably can get a pretty good handle on the drainages of those particular soils and whether they're good soils or they're bad soils for forest management.
So whenever he has good soil, he can expect to find good timber, is that right?
Not necessarily true. Past management history has done some things to the stands that may not paint a true picture, and I think we'll see some examples of that today as we go around.
Management history, you mean the way it was cut?
That's right, the way it was cut in the past, whether it be high graded or fire or something like that, does not paint a true picture. The vegetation does not paint a true picture of the soil potential that we have underneath.
So when he sees a kind of a lousy stand, it may still have good soil under it.
Absolutely.
Good
Absolutely.
reason to go out and look for his soil.
That's why I say we need to look up and down. We may not have even gone out and looked at that lousy stand because of the fact there's nothing growing there. It says, well, that can't be a good site. We may find it. What happened? There was a fire that went through there in 1922 that we don't know about.
So when we look underneath, we may find the answer.
That's right.
Is also the opposite true, that he may have some lousy sites and yet the trees look pretty nice?
I think so, because of time, and they've had the ability to adapt to whatever the limiting factor is in there, such as drainage or something like that. But he also learned that it took a long time for that particular stand to get into the condition that it's in.
Now, is there any way that the landowner can do this for himself when he goes in and looks around?
Yes, there is, and I think we'll do that. That would be the third way of finding the site. He takes a stand-type map, he locates himself on it, and he goes out and he walks through that stand. And I think we'll take this stand up here. We'll act as if it's our woodlot, and we'll walk out on it and try to locate some areas and dig some holes and get an idea of what the soil is.
Let's go out and take a look at the woodlot.
I think this is a good spot to kind of look out through the stand. The landowner now is kind of trying to make a decision of where he wants to excavate a small site or dig a small hole to find out what he's got on here. And we want to try to look at the average lay of the land, try to get a feel for what's out here. What he might do is go to the corners of his property and look around the stand, corners of that particular stand, not necessarily his whole property, and then at that corner locate that average spot and dig a small hole. I think as we look out towards this, I think somewhere over in that vicinity over there looks like a kind of average position. So why don't we go over there and see if we can find a place to dig a hole.
Let's dig a hole, Tom. See what this soil looks like. What do you say, right here somewhere?
Yeah, I just might point out some of the tools that we might try to use. These are things that I use. I use a tile spade or a soil auger. The landowner can very easily use a regular shovel or a regular spade when he's out in the woods. Now, one thing he'll find as he starts poking around out here is there are a lot of rocks oftentimes, and this is a result of the glacier.
Pretty sure crop.
That sure is. That sure is. So he still poke around and he'll find a spot. We got another rock there that you should be able to get the, there we go, get the shovel down into the soil, and then we'll try to take a cut out of this.
Now what we find here is we'll be able to relate to the soil that we looked at over on the edge of the road there.
It should be very closely related to it, and we kind of bias it a little bit because we know that, but if we didn't, we'll see what we've got and take what we've learned. Let's first take off, and what we'll do is we dig it out, try to put it in the sequence that we do get it out at. A little bit of rock we normally find in our soils up here. Well, Bud, let's take a shovelful out here and look at this soil a little more in detail. What do you see here, Bud?
Okay, well, we got some organic matter, that organic layer right on top that we talked about before, and starting to decompose. There's roots in it, and litter, and little pieces of limb and whatever. Not much of an A horizon. B is that good brown, reddish-brown color you said is a good example of soil that's productive, and that's what I see right here.
If you were classifying this site, what would you think it would be?
I'd ask a soil scientist.
Well, okay. Then I'd tell you it's a pretty good site.
This is a good site.
I think we have a lot of opportunities to spend our time in here and to have the interest paid back to us on this soils account.
So if we look at this like the bank account we talked about earlier, this is a bank account that would earn us a high rate of interest if we get our timber in good shape.
Right.
So good soil and pretty good timber is what we see here, and gives us quite a few options on what we can work with. We can have a partial cut, we can let it grow a while longer, or maybe we could even have a complete cut.
And I think that's what really we see with that bank account underneath there. We're going to see as we go to our good sites that we have a lot of options and a lot of opportunities to do the management in there. But if you don't have any more questions, well, why don't we just take a walk down here, and we'll see as we go how this kind of drops off into a poorly drained portion.
We're on a little knoll.
We're on a little hard upland knoll that's not untypical in many of the landscapes in the state of Maine. And we'll walk right down over here towards this opening and a little further, and I think we can see that it drops off pretty well.
Dropping off towards lower ground.
Right. This looks like a pretty good place, I think, Bud. We'll dig out a hole. I think as you're standing around, things we can notice is, one, the sponginess of the soil that we've got here. It's
just like a soft mattress,
soft mattress that you've got.
I see a lot of ferns out through here.
Yeah, and I think that might be a pretty good indication that we're getting into a wet area. I think we can look at the stand as I dig this hole out a little bit too. We don't have the good growth that we had up there. I'll take this out and we'll get you to classify it again, but get down a little further here. We're onto some rocks.
Rocks again, huh?
Yes, sir. Even on the poorly drained spots, we hit rocks. Well, Bud, now that we've got this soil dug out, what do you see here?
Well, we got some sphagnum moss on top.
Yeah, but well decomposed, but not decomposing that rapidly. That it's very small, which is typical of some of our wet sites.
No red or brown at all. And then down at the bottom, that blue-gray goo there, a lot of moisture.
There's still water in it right now. In that other hole we dug in, we had no evidence of water. What about roots? Where do you see the roots in here?
The roots are all up top, right
all
up in
top,
here.
Right. You don't see very few down here in the lower part of the profile.
So roots here no more than 4 or 6 inches deep at most.
Right. This is an example of what we would call a profile 3. Profile 1, we had good rooting depth. Here we have very little rooting depth. Good deep mineral soil with good colors in profile 1. No good colors and no real depth of the mineral soil in profile 3.
Now what brings that blue in there?
Well, it's waterlogged for such a long period of time. We can draw a very simple analogy here, is that back there the soil's well aerated. There's a lot of oxygen in it. And the ions that are in there turn red, just like iron rust.
They get rusty.
They get rusty.
No rust here.
No rust here because there's no air here. The water's here most of the time during the year. And that's why you don't get those good red colors, but instead you get this black, grayish materials in the lower part of the soil.
Now, when we're managing the Yankee Woodlot here, what does that mean to the rest of this stand?
Well, it really is going to limit the opportunities and the decisions that we're going to be able to do in here. This is a very tough stand to manage. If we take a few trees out, right now, because of this rooting depth, these trees, their crowns or their tops, are dependent on each other. They're get to a point that one is, when the wind blows, they move as a unit and not as individual trees. If we start taking out 1, 2, 5, 10 trees in various spots, there won't be any crowns for them to depend on. And what will happen, the first windstorm or heavy snowstorm we come through, we'll have half the trees back down on the ground again.
Just to sum up, Tom, we were up on the higher ground there with the red and brown soils, and that was Profile 1. That was a good site, good potential, good investment, good bank account. Down here, Profile 3, just sum that up for us now.
Okay, I think what we've seen, we're looking both up and down at the soil and at the trees. We're looking up there at the trees. We had a good stand. We had a good soil. We had a lot of options of what we could do there in managing that particular site. Here, we looked up, we looked down. We don't have such a good stand here, but by looking down, we also find we don't have many options here. So we're finding that on our good sites, we have a lot of opportunities. On our poor sites, we don't have as many opportunities. And we're finding that the places we want to spend our time are those areas that we have those good opportunities.
So less timber orientation on this site. We maybe see a little more orientation to wildlife, to wildflowers, ferns, and some of those things that are visually very pleasing, and less chance to do something with the timber in the future.
I think so. Well, Bud, now we've seen a good site with good timber and a poor site with poor timber. I'd like to take you to another part of our woodlot where that doesn't hold true, where by looking at the stand conditions, we may not really get a true picture of what we have the potential to do there. So if we want to, we'll take a walk to that site now.
Long ways across here, Tom. How much further?
Oh, not much further, Bud. I think we'll stop right around in here. Bud, look at this stand that we have out here. This is your woodlot. What do you think?
Well, I don't think too much of that one. Pretty heavy to popple and looks like gray birch. Looks kind of poor, bad timber.
Well, Bud, I think that's an example of where we need to look up and down before we make a decision about that site. Let's go on into the stand and dig a little hole and see what we've got there.
Okay. Let's go dig a hole.
I think we'll see a little different story than what the timber is telling us up here. Go right in through here.
Okay, Tom.
The thing to remember, Bud, is we're out here again. We want to look for kind of a representative area and kind of scoping this out as we walk in. I think right over here is a pretty representative area.
Good,
so
good average spot.
Go ahead and dig a little hole here. Let's see if we can get down through this. Still got those rocks, so it should be an indication of a glacial till, but where are we picking up?
Well, that orangey brown soil, I guess as I look around here, I got to say there's a little bit of softwood and some pine, and maybe it's not looking quite so bad, particularly when I look down and see the brown dirt.
Soil, Bud. Let's see if we get another shovel out of here, Bud, and give you an opportunity to think a little bit about what you see in here. I'll put that last shovel down there, push it off a little bit. Okay. Why don't you kneel on down and tell me what you see.
Okay, we've got a organic pad, not too deep, just an inch or two. We got some good brown soil in here, maybe 14 inches long or so. A few roots down about this area, but then it starts to change right here. It gets into that heavier material, a little more moisture. No sign of roots. This must be the sea horizon here, Tom.
That's right.
B is in here. No evidence of an A, and here's our organic matter on top.
That's right, Bud. And what we've gotten down to is the parent material, and we've gotten down to it a lot sooner than we did at the first site that we looked at today, and we're a little deeper than the second site that we looked at today. So this is really what we would call a Profile 2, Bud. It's intermediate between the first site that we looked at and a little bit better than the last site that we looked at.
So good potential here, not outstanding like that first one, but good potential for some timber management and some other things.
That's right, Bud. Now, if we look around the stand, though, what do we have as options in here as far as management's concerned? What do you think?
Well, there is some pine here. If we could find enough pine to leave for seed trees, we might be able to do a cut, leave pine seed trees, and expect those pine to seed in. If we don't find enough pine as we look around, then probably we'd do some type of commercial harvest. With the quality of this timber, probably wouldn't be much more than firewood or perhaps hardwood pulpwood, and then think about having a new stand come from planting, tree planting or whatever. Right. So it looks like a pretty good soil, but timber on the surface doesn't look too good.
And I think it goes back to what we were seeing on that first site. We've got a fairly good soil situation, and we've got a lot of options of what we can do to get this stand into productivity and get it going.
Right.
But by standing outside it and just looking up, we really didn't get a true picture of what we had in here and what we could do with it.
Yeah. So the soil scientist told me earlier today, when I look down, I see a pretty good picture, and up above, it's just an average or a little below average. At this point in our series, you know where your land is, what's on it, and what's under it. These are the basic building blocks from which the rest of your work in the Yankee Woodlot will develop. It's also a good basis to use in the establishment of your personal management objectives. Next time, we'll go into the Yankee Woodlot with two foresters. One will review with us those key indicators which you, as a landowner, can see to develop a feeling for the woodlot's overall health. The other will help us plan for roads and trails. That's it for this program. Please join us next time in the Yankee Woodlot.
Yankee Woodlot was produced by the Maine Public Broadcasting Network, which is solely responsible for its content, and was made possible in part by a grant from International Paper Company.